Now, this is it. This is it for the 20s, right here. I'm going to just explain it, and then I'll give you a couple more pictures, but this is it. After the 1920s, we have this disillusionment. And this is kind of a way of understanding the 1920s. Keep in mind that there's all sorts of aspects of our American society. Okay, we have politics, we have economics, we have the farmers, we have entertainment, the jazz age, all sorts of things, right? Okay, so on one hand, we go off to Europe and we think World War I is corrupt. This never changes. We just have some hope that the U.S. will kind of cure the corruption, right? That's our goal. And what happens with the Treaty of Versailles? No cure. Okay. Versailles. No cure. No cure. So we're a little upset about this. So we do two things right off the bat. I mean, immediately. Because we feel like we somehow failed. And if you're really a faith in progress, if you fail, if you believe that you really can fix this, if you failed, whose fault is it?
Your own.
Yeah. Somehow we didn't do it right. We should have been able to convince the Europeans. Why didn't we?
They wouldn't have listened anyway.
There's real reasons, and then there's this kind of personal, kind of emotional reaction. Remember I was talking about the gold standard 25 years earlier here, right? The gold standard didn't really have any effect on the economy. Would it have changed the economy? No. But emotionally, people that hoarded gold were these wealthy people. We had this envy of that, right? So we had this emotional reaction. Same thing with World War I. Could we have fixed World War I? Could we have made the English and the French not be upset that they lost all these millions of people? No. But we felt like we could. So immediately, we do this. Why did we fail? Drunk men.
What?
I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. Except, let me show you a picture. What is this?
Oh, geez, Prohibition.
We make people poor. Hun rule. What is Hun? Germans. Hun rule associate. Who's most of the beer makers in the country?
Germans.
Germans, right? Are they on the good side? Hun rule. Yeah, we are against progress. We cause poverty and crime. We rob women and children, and just all the way down the line. Drunk men. Now, they're not saying drunk men caused the war, but kind of they're saying drunk men caused the war. Immediately, when the war is over, Prohibition, the idea of limiting alcohol has been around since when, do you think? How about the 1840s? Okay? So, 70 years, never did anything with it. As soon as the war comes around, boom! Oh yeah, this is a great idea. What about votes for women? Remember, I talked about this in this class. Nobody's going to make that silly mistake. Women's suffrage has nothing to do with beating women. Right? You guys understand that? What is women's suffrage? Woman's right to vote. Okay, very good thing, right? That movement has been around since when? Like 1848. 1848. Why do we suddenly give women the right to vote in 1920? Because who screwed it up? Men! It's totally, that's exactly what it is. That really is just that simple. It had been around, but it was not gaining movement. It was not gaining traction until World War I, and then boom, absolutely. We'll pass both these things. Which one comes first? 18th and 19th, right? You know that both of them, this is an easy one to confuse, and I'm going to just hint, you should know this. Which one comes first? Banning alcohol, the sale of alcohol, or giving women the right to vote?
Banning alcohol came first.
Why?
Because women weren't on their minds. Banning the booze was more of a priority.
Close, but these are like within months, so they're kind of both going through at the same time.
Yeah.
Good explanation. How about this? Why didn't women have the right to vote? This is just going to blow your mind because your textbook says exactly the opposite of this. But everybody that was at the time said the reason why women don't have the right to vote is that women
voting.
No. That your textbooks will say men hate women, right? It's such an easy answer, except who voted in this amendment?
Men!
They had to. They're the only ones that can vote, right? So if they hate women, why are they allowing women to vote? It doesn't make any sense at all. It's not. Because that's not why they didn't give women the right to vote. Women, many women, and for up until World War I, a majority of women did not want the right to vote. Why?
Too many problems.
Why? You're right. What were the problems? What kind of problems? Do you guys remember we were talking about Tammany Hall? About these political parties in the cities? When you think of politics, especially urban politics and the party machines, is this like a clean and wholesome image that's in your head? No. What were women? Women were clean and wholesome. Women were the caretakers of the family. Women were these leaders, the representations of virtue. They don't want to be in politics because if they're in politics, then they get besmirched by this type of corruption. This is so funny because today, you guys don't get this because you have an entire, just like an avalanche of voices that are telling you women have to do this, women have to do that, and if you don't go out and do all these things, then you're a horrible woman. If you ever wanted to go home and be a mom, what a horrible thing. It's this huge pressure. And if any of you just want to be moms, you know exactly what I mean. The pressure is that somehow you failed if that's what you're doing.
Or if you're a single mom and your kid's throwing a temper tantrum and you have no way of controlling it, it's your fault that he's screaming his head off.
But at this time, in the progressive era, that is not what's on their mind. Women are saying, I'm in charge of my family. I have more influence on my husband and on my children if I'm not in politics. Because who's going to vote? My husband and my children. Right? I have more influence over them by being this kind of virtuous, moral icon. Now today, we hate that. Especially modern feminism hates that. Because they say, why should women have to be virtue? They should be able to do anything that men do, this whole double standard stuff. That's fine, but that's modern. It's not then. Then, the women did not want to do that. So what changed the mind? What changed the mind of the men that said, you know, we need to get women out there? Well, aside from World War I, why is alcohol removed first?
A woman had a fight. Or no, my wording's off.
So you think of this image of the party politics, the urban party politics. Sometimes they usually refer the image of the smoke-filled back room. Smoke and booze, right? These guys are controlling this. If you want women in this political scene, what do you have to do?
Clean it up.
Clean it up. It's exactly the idea. Clean it up. And a lot of the women who are going to get this vote, they are strongly in favor of prohibition. Most of prohibition is supported by strong women's movements for exactly what they listed up there. Alcoholic men, drunk men, ruin the family. So they're going to get it one way or the other. So give it to them first, then give the women right to vote. 18, get rid of alcohol. Clean the area. Then give women the right to vote, and they will clean up politics. Now, did this actually happen? Do you guys know? Happen to know? Did women vote like women in 1919,
No.
1920, 1921?
No.
I don't know if they actually vote like women today. They vote like people. It's a weird idea. You know, people, whether you're a woman, white or black, old, young, you're just kind of a person. You all have different ideas. But in your mind, often we assume that this group will vote like a block. You guys understand that Mark term? A block, not B-L-O-C-K, just B-L-O-C. What does that mean, to vote like a block?
They're not going to think about who they're voting for.
Yeah, no. It means that as all of you guys, if you're UW-Richland and you voted as a block, then you would be voting as someone who represents UW-Richland. If you vote as a block for women, then you would be voting as a woman. You wouldn't care about anything else. Or men voting as men. I don't know that that's ever really happened, but there was a hope that if that happened, suddenly things would change. When women got the vote, how many women immediately jumped down and said, I want to vote?
Not very many.
Not a majority. Not a majority for a very long time. Why? Because there's still some women that say, yeah, I don't know whether I want to get in.
Because it's still a disaster.
Now, okay, things change, obviously. How many of you guys vote? I think today more women vote than men. I could be wrong on that. I think today more women vote than men. What about, I don't want to get into a lot of stuff, but do 18-year-olds vote?
I do.
Good, good. 19-year-olds? How about the second time you get to vote? 20, 21, do you guys vote? Yeah, okay, some people, not as much, actually.
Because they don't think their opinion matters.
Depends on who it is.
No, this is a hard one. It's called laziness. Did you guys get that?
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
No.
No. Okay. Put it aside. It happens back then too. The first reaction is to be more moral. And then there's a second reaction. This is the one that you guys see all the time when you think about the 20s, and unfortunately it's only half the picture. So we have Prohibition. You have to realize that was Prohibition successful?
Not, depends.
Okay, it depends. What do you mean by it depends? Because you're right, that is the answer.
There was bootlegging, there was smuggling, there was, people were still getting drunk.
Okay.
Back alleys, speakeasies, you name it, they were still getting their booze.
Okay, I'm only going to say this a little bit because I don't want to spend too much time, but I have a book out right now that's dealing with this subject. Urban areas are filled with mainly immigrants. In the 1920s, what religion are most of these immigrants? They're Catholic or they're Jewish, right? Do Catholics or Jews really have a problem with alcohol?
Not really.
Not really. It's kind of a cultural thing, especially Eastern Europe, Russia, Ireland. These aren't things where we hate alcohol, okay? And so in the urban areas, there was no desire to support Prohibition. But what about the rural areas? These folks are mostly Protestants. Do Protestants have a problem with alcohol often?
Yes.
Not all. You're not talking about today, but then.
Yeah.
Most of them do. Rural areas really liked Prohibition. Was it successful? Well, it depends on what you're talking about. Did you know that Richland Center kept Prohibition until 1989?
Oh, wow.
1989.
Oh, who?
89.
Recently,
No alcohol served. 89. Some of you guys were born, what, a year or two after that? Maybe 3 or 4. I don't know how old you guys are, but not that much longer. That's really late. In rural areas, the ideal of Prohibition reform was very successful. In urban areas, it wasn't. And here's the problem. The people don't want to support it. I'm going to give you one thing to get here, and I don't want you to take too much from this, but the law, Prohibition, bans the sale and manufacture of alcohol. What does that mean? What's missing?
Still drink it.
You can still drink it. It's not illegal to buy it or to drink it. The guy who sells it to you is committing a crime, but you can drink it and buy it, right? If you somehow magically get tons of it, nothing wrong with drinking it. It's not illegal to use or to drink. It only bans the manufacture and sale. So what does that mean? When you've got all these people in urban areas that have no problem drinking.
They find ways of getting their booze.
Sure, so you get organized crime. It's a black market. The only people to get hit are the ones selling. You go into a speakeasy, what's a speakeasy?
You're not gonna do like a not passcode, just sneak in around.
You go to Milwaukee, they still have like modern speakeasies. It's a joke. It's like a tourist trap thing. But you go in there, you give them the password, you get to go under, and you get to pretend like you're in Prohibition days. It's kind of really cool, right? Well, a speakeasy was kind of a way for these wealthy guys in the urban area, because remember, their economy is booming, to go in and kind of live on the wild side. Are you breaking the law by going and buying alcohol? No. Now, often they have alcohol and what other big vice at the time? Gambling. Is that illegal? That's illegal. But there's no illegal with just drinking. So you go in there, you drink. The guy who gets in trouble if they raid the joint is not you, it's them.
The guy who's selling.
And so there's not very much risk. So that means what happens to the demand for alcohol? It has no effect just because it's prohibition. Demand is very high, and so that's where the connection with organized crime pops in. Because the guy who's willing to break the law, he's the one that's going to supply it for you. Pretty easy. Okay. That's just a side.
That's why your bootleggers come in, they're smuggling it out.
Jazz age. So who is this?
Jeez.
You don't need to know the person's name because Flapper. Okay, so I just talked about one of the first reactions to World War I is greater reform, and yet this is what your textbook is going to focus on mostly, which is very funny to me. Who is she? What does she represent? When they talk about the Jazz Age, what do they always talk about?
Flappers.
Flappers, right?
Short hair, their short skirts, no stockings. Yeah.
No morality, sitting there dancing, doing it. Okay, throw that out the window. Yes, there is a certain culture. F. Scott Fitzgerald writes about this. Hemingway writes about this. The fact that there's just certain groups that are partying all the time, right? It is true. It's like a movable feast is what they call it. So you go from one bar, and then the whole group gets up, goes to the next bar, and the whole group goes up. Yeah, it's modern bar hopping, right? But this isn't everybody. And yes, this is clearly the opposite of what the people were wearing in the 1915. What did women dress like in 1915? Does anybody know?
Covered like from the neck down or whatever.
So, okay. And I'm a horrible artist, okay?
It's like tight, you can't breathe and whatever else. Modest as heck.
And a big hat, right? So, down, and here's your
You can really, yeah.
top to bottom.
She's the
Tiny little waist, though.
Tiny waist.
Not a good artist. The point is that everything is covered, right? That's 1915. And when you look here, what's not covered? Not much, but it's totally different. Not only that, how many layers do you have under this?
Like 15.
You have this underneath, and then you got rid of the bustle maybe 20 years ago, but you probably have at least 3 layers under that. Not to mention your underpants, which aren't bra and panties today. They're like a full-scale thing. That's like your true underpants. So you've got just tons of stuff in there, just in case anything happens. What do you have under this? Not much, right? It's just one of those not much type things. So is she immoral? Well, don't get me wrong, some of them were, right? But also, it was just a fashion. It was a design, style. And part of it is, you know what? Okay, maybe we got duped to go over Europe. But you know what? Maybe the problem is that maybe our standards are just too high. Let's just give up. And I make that joke, but that's actually kind of what they were saying. F. Scott Fitzgerald, that's the main thesis of most of his books, is that these people forgot why they were being moral and prim and proper, why they were having this manifest destiny ideal. It doesn't really matter. So here you have this very weird situation where one side of the country is going for more reform, and the other is almost nihilism. I say this guardedly because you don't know what nihilism is until you get on Facebook in 2018. Then you get nihilism. You guys all understand what is nihilism? Do you guys know what it means? Okay, the thing is, you do,
But we don't.
but you don't know the word. Nihilism. There is no truth, and therefore, there is no morality. Nothing matters. I'm not on Facebook, but just watch the memes. Watch the things that people find funny, okay? There's no standards, okay? Today is nihilism. You don't really have nihilism in the 1920s, but in fact, you do have the beginning of that type of a concept. They're two totally different directions. Which one is greater, the reform side or this kind of wild flapper jazz age side? No. By a long stretch, the reform side. Why is this? Because when you look at the crazy flapper, you're really looking at these extremes. Most of the people that use the style aren't the people. You guys know this today. Somebody might have piercings all over them. Are they always radical, crazy people?
No.
No.
They probably just like me.
Somebody who wants tattoos because when they turned 18, they thought that was the best way in the world to prove that they were an adult. And because they're 18, they can't see the future. And so does that mean that they're a crazy, wild person? No, it's like a moment, right? Most of the people are actually here. They can borrow the fashions and the styles that are being promoted here, but most of the people are here. Of these two groups, which is winning? The reform side. You can see this in lots of areas. Watch any movie from the 20s. This will come up way more than that. Any of it. Okay, we'll push this aside. By the way, I teach a really fun film and social history class in the spring, and next year, who hasn't graduated, you should go and take that class because it's a ton of fun. We watch movies. Okay, I'm pushing this aside. The Klan, I won't talk about this, but there's one funny thing about the Klan. Your textbook likes to throw it in there because it's an example of everybody being racist, because that's such the easiest message you could throw in any textbook. Yeah, everyone is racist. Oh yeah, by the way, did you forget? It's racist. Okay, maybe. But let me explain to you what happened to the Klan. This is a very funny thing. I think it's funny. In Indiana, during the 1920s, 1 out of 3 people were in the Klan.
Whoa.
It's true. It was strongly against Catholics. It was very anti-Catholic because Catholics, as I mentioned, and the immigrants in general, did they support Prohibition?
No.
Generally not. And so the Klan was strongly in favor of Prohibition. Now here, let me just give you the story. Obviously, there are different Klans in all the states, but the biggest, the ones that really dominated the 1920s, all thought of themselves as reformers. In the South, you had some Klan folks, they're just good old-fashioned, naughty, hate racing type things. But outside of the South, most of the Klan was anti-Catholic. It was about, in their mind, drunks. It was about alcohol. This is the humor of all humors. In my mind, I think it's funny. The guy who starts is Simmons. He was a member of 78 different fraternal organizations. The Masons, the Elks, the Knights, this, that, whatever. He just loved fraternal organizations. He saw a movie called Birth of a Nation that tried to depict the Klan. Now, the funny thing is that Birth of a Nation got everything wrong. But on film, when you saw it, Birth of a Nation was the first movie that was actually nationally shown, and it was a full-length movie. It was like 3 hours long. Everybody loved this. And in parts of it, they showed this Klan, and they had these cool robes, and they're out there, and they had a burning cross. None of this happened in real life. It's not history. It's a movie. Simmons loved the imagery of it. And so he created the Klan called the Second Klan. And it was all about this really cool regalia. They had all these codes. And in his mind, it was about honor. It was about protecting the American way. But this is the funny thing. So,
Oh my God.
8 years. Indiana has 1 out of 3 people is in the Klan. The head, called the Grand Dragon, they had great names for the leaders. The Grand Dragon of the Klan got caught with a 16-year-old girl at a drunken party where she got pregnant and was forced to have an abortion. He forced her to have an abortion, and she died. So let's just talk about all the list of naughty things here. Okay, alcohol, the sex with an underage girl, abortion, everything that's evil in the world, right? And it was exposed in the headlines what happened to the Klan overnight. He's the head of the Klan.
Disappeared.
It did. Now, isn't that kind of ironic to have a scandal in the Klan? Wouldn't you think the Klan is itself a scandal?
Yeah.
Like if somebody says I was in the Klan, you'd be horrified. But what this means is that it's not the Klan that you think of today. The Klan you think of today came up in the 1950s. The 20s Klan was all about this reform. And the fact that the leader, who's getting tons of money because of all the memberships, got sucked into the alcohol and the women and the sex and the naughtiness, whole thing, literally, overnight. Boom. The Klan is gone. So what does that tell you about the Klan? What does that tell you about this conflict between this desire for reform and this other side?
Pointless.
Okay. I've got like 2 minutes left here.